Hey everyone, it is Mica and I'm back with yet another class from Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, and today's class is Ranger. Yes, everybody's favorite pew pew job, and I don't think this is going to be a terribly long one as there are very few Ranger abilities listed on the official site, but you want to know what? Let's get started and see. The wilds of Terminus call to Rangers, drawing them deeper into its mysteries. It is in these untamed regions of the world that Rangers are forged into versatile and ferocious warriors, united with the land and animals they commune with. The Ranger excels at both melee and ranged combat, able to weave between the two with elegant ease. In close combat, Rangers prefer the use of one-handed weapons over two-handed, able to deliver devastating damage with swift precision. When the Ranger chooses to withdraw from close-quarter combat, they can masterfully employ bows and crossbows to inflict lethal range damage, restrain enemies, illuminate their environment, set traps, or flee from danger. See, now this one makes me happy right out of the gate. It's not because there's a whole lot of lore or even a lot of information here, but the one thing that has always bugged me is that game companies always limit Rangers to strictly bows, and even when a mob is in your face, you're still knocking them arrows. I like that they say from the get-go that the Ranger is more than just an endless quiver. Side note, speaking of endless ammo, I actually did a video on that already. I will link it in the corner as well as in the description in case you are interested in my thoughts on that. The Ranger has only one resource to manage, and that is momentum, something that will build up over time as you do damage, and the higher it builds, the more it will also speed you up, giving you a maximum of a 20% boost to your skill speed. You can also use momentum to execute some other abilities. Now, it doesn't say what those abilities are, just that they are something that you're going to have to spend momentum on, so I really can't give you any specific information on that front. But from the streams with the devs I've seen, it seems that some of your abilities are going to generate momentum and some are going to use it, making it not necessarily a resource that you need to sit on, but one that you may want to use a little bit more tactically to maintain a high skill speed while maximizing other areas of combat. This possibly may add a layer of complexity to Ranger that we don't normally see, and it kind of reminds me of the TP or the tactical point system from Final Fantasy XI, where some abilities will generate TP and then you use that TP to execute more devastating attacks. But that is not necessarily a bad thing because it does keep you a lot more engaged and you're not necessarily just going to be spamming a couple buttons to pew pew the entire time. There are three races that can take up the quiver: the glorious and the ever wonderful elf, the halfling, and the human, but that kind of goes without saying. Rangers can also use cloth, leather, and light mail armor, and they will have access to bows, crossbows, and most one-handed weapons. And that's pretty nifty if you ask me. And now let's move on to abilities. And of course that means first we're going to look at passive abilities, or ability as the case may be, as there is only one listed. And that one is Veil Guard Stride, which will increase your movement speed after you are outside for a short amount of time, and of course will cancel it when you go back indoors. Another nifty ability that you're going to have as a Ranger is the ability to forage and use what you find to create balms, tonics, and weapon coatings that will do a variety of things, from adding effects to your weapons, to getting bonus momentum from abilities, or even giving you a faster natural health regen. Outside of foraging, you're also going to be able to do things like tracking, which is going to allow you to find things that others may miss, and thereby allow you to find specific targets. If it gets a little bit too dark, you can use Flare to shoot a flaming arrow into the ground to provide some light. And since you have a fire going, you may decide to set up camp, and like any good Ranger, you're going to want to set up a few hidden snares, which will root an enemy in place for 30 seconds and give them a dot effect. But enough of all that, let's talk about animals, because animals is one of the more exciting parts of a Ranger for me when they are included in a game anyway. But in Pantheon, the Ranger will have a fair share of abilities that have to do with our fantastic forest friends. Now, before I really get into that, I want to have a little side note story time here, since some of the other Pantheon guys tease me for being a real-life elf or a real-life druid due to all my plants and my gardens and stuff like that. But I want to show how I also dual class with Ranger. So when I was a kid, probably 8 to 13, I would go hunting with my brothers, and I never wanted to kill anything, so I'd always point my bows and my guns above the different animals' heads. This means our hunts were never really that lucrative, but that's beside the point. My brothers used to yell at me all the time to make noise, because apparently when I was walking through the brush or through the woods and stuff, I wouldn't make any noise, they couldn't hear me, and they were scared about accidentally shooting me. So eventually they started taking bets on how close I could get to different animals before they noticed me. And you wanna know what? I won a lot of those bets quite often, because more than once I was able to walk up to a doe and slap her on the ass before she noticed I was there, or just other random animals. My mom used to get really pissed off too when I was little, because I would sit in our yard or I'd go to the family farm and I would just be sitting there feeding wild animals out of my hand and petting them, and they just never bothered me, and she was scared I was going to get mauled. But hey, that's who I am. Dual classing. It's what the cool kids do. But anyway, let's get back to Ranger. Not only will you have animal companions to fight alongside you, more on that later, but you will also have friendly animals that will help you out in other ways. Lay of the Land Ferret Scout, for instance, will allow you to control a little ferret to scout ahead a short distance, and Lay of the Land's Hawk Scout will allow you to do this but from the air. Now, if you haven't played it, we also had this in Far Cry Primal, and it was an ability I used all the time. I cannot believe how, like, using a hawk to scout ahead, how handy that came in. So I'm actually really excited to see that here again. There are also a few abilities listed as beckons, the first of which is Beckon Hawks, which will summon a pair of hawks to lift you up and carry you to a target location. And there's also Beckon Veil Striders, which will summon a pack of Veil Striders to run alongside you, increasing your movement speed. If you are attacked in the wild by an animal and you do not want to fight it, you can use Kalen's command, which will calm it down and make it friendly. And if you'd rather just not deal with it at all and sneak around it, you can use Ladwin's Whisper to reduce an animal's aggro range temporarily. But remember when I said that you will also have animals to fight alongside of you? Well, there are two listed that you can call. Beckon Thunderpaw will call a Thunderpaw Bear, and Beckon Pantheress will call a Pantheress, both of which will fight alongside of you for a short time and make your enemy more vulnerable to physical attacks and damage, respectively. I assume in this artwork that we see a Pantheress, but I only assume that because it's a big cat. There are two abilities listed that require you to be within melee range. Ferocious Assault, which will deal physical damage and have a chance of interrupting your target's spellcasting, and Withdraw, which will make you kick an enemy, launching you into the air and then hitting them with a range attack. So Ranger sounds like it might be a little showy, and I like that because there's nothing wrong with fighting in style. When it comes to ranged abilities, the Ranger is also not just your standard pew-pew. You can use abilities like Warning Shot to fire an arrow into the ground and then just stand back and wait, because as soon as the enemy gets within range, an alarm will sound and you will get a message stating that the enemy is approaching. And as honestly as cool as this one is, I kind of hope we get a different version of this that will just send us a silent message without the alarm part, you know, for a little bit more of a sly recon. If you are sick of using your bow and you want to fight up close but are just not interested in walking, you can use Harpoon Shot to fire an arrow with a rope attached and bring your enemy to you. Get over here! If your enemy is too close to you and invading your personal space, or has some horrific bad breath or some BO or something, you can always use Weighted Bolt, which will hit them with a blunt bolt, simply knocking them away from you without doing any damage. Also known as abilities that would be incredibly wonderful to have in real life. Aim to Kill will fire 3 arrows at a time for a little bonus damage, and if your agility or dexterity is high enough, you can add up to 2 more arrows on top of that. Glass Arrow will fire a glass-tipped arrow that will explode on impact, dealing damage and causing a bleed effect. And finally, this is a fun one, and I don't think I've seen one like this in an MMO before, mostly just single-player games, but it's called Silent Arrow. And this ability can only be used out of combat and will switch you into a first-person view so you can take really careful aim and do really big number damage. Now, if you also use this in conjunction with something like Hidden Snare and the enemy is stuck in any sort of trap, you are also guaranteed to crit. And that's all they have for Ranger, which is kind of disappointing because I was really getting into this one. But it's funny because last time I was saying summoners, so Humdrum, and very much a summoner that we've played a million times before in a million different games. And then we get hit with this Ranger, which is still a Ranger, but refreshingly different from an MMO perspective. Number one, they don't force you into a purely ranged role. I love that we're able to switch between melee and ranged. The key here will be for Visionary Realms to keep it balanced so that each combat style is just as effective as the other or complements each other. This ranger is also more reminiscent of an actual ranger type class than we usually get in an MMO. Because let's face it, ranger usually just means that your main weapon is a bow and you may or may not have an animal companion. Usually though, it's just that you fight mainly with a bow. You also have animal companions, but they help you out in more ways than being just bonus damage. You have abilities to do things like forage for supplies and set traps, plus being outdoors, the ranger's natural habitat comes with boons of its own. It's like they took the standard ranger that we see in every game and took it up to the next level. Instead of putting their own spin on ranger, which is something I'm a huge fan of, they made it more a true ranger, which strangely enough for MMOs is kind of like putting your own spin on it. Either way, I really like this class. The only thing I would change myself would be to add a little bit of a stealth element and maybe give it the ability to dual wield depending on how limited melee weapons are. But that is that for Ranger. What do you think? Do you like it as much as I do, or are you a little bit more hesitant? Let me know below, and while you're down there, follow me on Twitter or Instagram, and check out the official site of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen in case you want more information or have finally decided to pledge. Next, we will be taking a closer look at Rogue, and we are quickly running out of classes, so if you have any suggestions that what I should cover next, if there's anything specifically you want to know about, send me a message and let me know. And as per the usual, it has been a hoot. Until next time, have fun.